If you're planning to read Higurashi, you have come to the right place. Welcome to my spoiler-free reading guide. This video is going to cover everything you need to know before reading Higurashi, including the installation of the games and various recommended reading orders. Lots of information about Higurashi's extra content and recommended reading orders are also going to be included. Firstly, to download Higurashi, get it on Steam. Once you've installed it, I'd really recommend using the 07th mod with your Steam game. It massively improves the experience because it provides lip sync and voice acting for the characters. It really improves the customization you can have to your reading experience as well. You can pick soundtracks, backgrounds, sprites, stuff like that. So to download the 07th mod installer, go to the GitHub page, I've linked it in the description. Go down to the bottom of the page, press install. When you open the installer, you are going to get a little pop-up saying that Windows protected your PC. It's nothing to worry about though, this is perfectly safe. It's only displaying this message because Windows doesn't recognise the publisher. Now you can open up the 07th mod. Firstly, select the game you wish to mod. There are a few mod options. I would recommend using the high quality OG sprites if you want to use them. There's some language patches. You can change the look of the Steam banner. And when you're happy about the settings, press install. When you first launch the game, there's going to be a little prompt asking you for which BGM and sound effects you want to use. What's on the screen is what I'd recommend. In the description, I've provided a little list that shows all of the differences between each option. When using the 07th mod, there are quite a lot of hotkeys you can use to improve your experience. I've listed them here. We've now got the game running, so let's talk about reading orders. I would firstly recommend only focusing on the first 8 chapters and reading them in order. When you're reading a chapter, once having read a section of it, you may receive a tip, which is a really quite small extra story that accompanies the chapter. Remember to read them the second you unlock them, as they sometimes provide vital information on the next part of the story. Once having read the entire visual novel, you will also unlock either a character cast or staff room event. These pieces of extra content aren't compulsory, but I definitely recommend them. They're pretty nice ways to wind down from the action of the story. Also, upon finishing a story, the character jump option lets you access any point of the story. Higurashi also has a few pieces of extra content that can be read alongside the main chapters. However, I wouldn't recommend reading any of this extra content until having finished all of the main arcs. A lot of the extra content, firstly, it's not nearly as good as the main content, and secondly, it may spoil or undermine the greatness of some of the important plot points. Only bother with the extra content after having finished all 8 chapters. In Matsuribayashi's Connecting Fragments arc, mini-stories called Fragments are required to be read in a certain order. There's a really quite helpful Steam guide which shows the required reading orders and can be found in the description. Once having finished Matsuribayashi, be prepared, there is a secret ending that has a really dumb requirement for. Firstly, you've got to re-access the Connecting Fragments arc via character jump. One fragment not read in the correct order means it breaks. For unlocking this ending, you have to skip through every single fragment without breaking a single one. If you're using the guide for the required reading order, remember to use the bonus scene order instead of the main scene order. You can either go through all this and get an extra Steam achievement, or you can just watch the video on YouTube. The choice is yours. Once having read every single question and answer arc, the only extra content that is considered a must-read by fans is Higurashi Mei, due to its Saikoroshi chapter. This is seen as an extra ending that nicely closes the curtain on all of the characters. It has quite a lot of significance to the main plot and consists of pretty strong scenes for a certain character. Some actually view this as a 9th main arc. You are missing out if you don't read this. Once having read Saikoroshi, you have read all of Higurashi's essential content. This means we're now going to fall into the deep rabbit hole of Higurashi's extra content. If you haven't finished Higurashi's main content yet, I wouldn't recommend watching anything past Higurashi Day. I think you should definitely read the main content before planning which extra content to read. Anyway, if that doesn't apply, here we go, let's talk about it. So firstly, there are two types of extra content, arcs initially released on PC and arcs initially released on the console versions of Higurashi. We're firstly going to cover the extra content released on PC. The other two chapters in Higurashi Day aren't essential to the main plot, but depending on the type of person you are, they may be a good laugh. Higurashi is a short comedic story with a little bit of a serious and sweet message thrown in at the end. It comes in two versions, the PC and console version. Both stories have basically the same beginning, but different endings. I definitely recommend the console version. Firstly, PC version has no voice acting. Secondly, in my opinion, the console version's ending is longer and also more entertaining. The console version's also a lot more varied in soundtrack. The next chapter you can read is Batsukoishi. This can be read before or after Higurashi, but I'd recommend doing it after because it's a lot lower quality of a story. It is a pretty perverted fanservice arc. Some find it funny, where others find it downright painful. Definitely not for everyone, your choice if you want to read it or not. Once you've finished all of the chapters, there is also an all-cast review and a staff room that you can enjoy. The next addition to the PC extra content is Hor Plus. This can be read any time after the main content and can be read before or after the console arcs. It consists of 4 chapters that don't really have any relevance to the main story and can be treated as canon. It, annoyingly enough, has a forced reading order due to some stories being initially locked. Firstly, Hinamizawa Bus Stop and Outbreak are the only stories you can read. Once having read them, Kamikashimashi unlocks. Read Hinamizawa Bus Stop first so that you can read Outbreak directly before Kamikashimashi. This is because Kamikashimashi is a continuation of Outbreak's story. After having read all 3 stories, Mehagashi will be unlocked. Search up the English translation of this chapter and then you will probably realise that this is a fanservice arc. It's really quite similar to Hajisarashi due to it being set in a swimming pool. It's a real laugh, I won't deny that, but it is perverted. After finishing all of the arcs, an all-cast review unlocks. Quite a lot of staff rooms also exist. All these really do is give us an insight into the lives of the people who were making Higurashi at the time of certain chapters releasing. We see the team's thoughts and it is quite fun to connect with the writers a little bit more, but yeah, there really isn't much point. If you don't want to read this, don't feel like you have to. Let's now look at Higurashi's console arcs. These arcs can be downloaded by using the 07th mod. Be aware that installing the console arcs overwrites Himatsubushi, so that story is going to be inaccessible when the console arcs are installed. Don't worry though, Himatsubushi can be reinstalled, so it really isn't much of a problem. The console arcs can be sorted into 3 types: the alternate scenarios, the advanced story, and the miscellaneous. Here is my personal recommended reading order for the console arcs. The first console arc I want to mention is Hajisarashi. This is a really quite funny fanservice arc, and it covers the events which happened before Saikoroshi. It could be viewed as a prequel to Saikoroshi, but it doesn't really have any relevance to that story, aside from showing the fun the club had before the story took place. I'd personally recommend reading Saikoroshi and then reading this for the chapter you read next. Now, I've got to make something clear. Nearly everything we talk about from this point onwards wasn't written by Ryukishi 07, despite being considered official Higurashi content. Most of these arcs were mainly written by Kano Kiichi. Some chapters definitely have decreased quality due to different writers. The best console arcs, however, are on par with some of the main series content. It really does have a lot of ups and downs, but if you want to savor Higurashi as much as possible, then I couldn't recommend them enough. Let's firstly talk about the alternate scenarios. These arcs present the question of what if. These show how the chapter's endings can change if the problematic turning points are responded to in a different way. Tadaimawashi is an alternate end to Onikakushi, Tsukiotoshi is for Tatarigoroshi, and Miotsukushi PS2 is for Matsuribayashi. There's no compulsory reading order, but I'd recommend reading them in the order of which chapters they present a different scenario to. It's recommended to read these before the advanced stories, but it isn't compulsory to do so, and you could in theory do it the other way round. However, I feel like it's better to get the content most similar to the 8 main chapters out of the way first, when the events are freshest in your mind. The advanced stories are very different to the main arcs in terms of character, setting, plot. This is why I'd recommend reading anything relating to the main content before reading the advanced story. Out of all of these arcs, I think Miotsukushi PS2 is the only must read. It is an emotional roller coaster of a read, and I personally think it's much more of a satisfying finale than Matsuribayashi. Tadaimawashi and Tsukiotoshi are the definition of average, but they're fun for seeing the element of probability in Higurashi and just how much can change depending on the character's response to the disaster. Let's now talk about the advanced stories. These are set outside of Hinamizawa and show the effects the gas disaster has on not only the wider world, but also future Hinamizawa itself. There is an abundance of new characters, with some of them having connections to Hinamizawa. We do still get to see some of the main characters in these stories, but they're definitely not the main focus. Here's my ideal reading order for the advanced stories. The first 3 advanced stories feature police case files. These are tiny little tip-like stories which act as the prologue and epilogues to Someutsushi, Kageboshi, and Yoigoshi. To unlock the police case files, simply click the police case files icon in the chapter menu, and you'll be directed to the tips they replace. If you want to read the police case files in order, read the first 3 stories in the order Someutsushi, Kageboshi, Yoigoshi. However, if you don't want to read them, you can read Yoigoshi at any time, ideally after the main content. This is because it doesn't have much relevance to any other advanced story. The advanced story also comes with unique fragments. These come after Kotohogushi and before Miotsukushi Ura. Please do not skip the fragments, read them before Miotsukushi Ura because they are essential for setting up some of the events and providing context for that chapter. Though the fragments aren't required to be read in any order, I would still recommend using the order on the 07th expansion wiki. The link to this page can be found in the description. Right, we now get onto a question nearly everybody reading Higurashi's console content has. Which Miotsukushi do I read? Firstly, let me give an explanation on all 3 chapters. Miotsukushi PS2 is an alternate ending to Matsuribayashi and can be read any time after it. It was made before any advanced stories were introduced into Higurashi, meaning it has no connection whatsoever and doesn't feature any advanced story cast. Miotsukushi Ura is then the finale to the advanced stories. Miotsukushi Omote is basically exactly the same as Miotsukushi PS2, but with a few scenes changed and a few more ties to the advanced story given. To find an order to read the Miotsukushi chapters in, ask yourself this: do I intend to read the advanced stories or not? If you don't intend to read the advanced stories, after Matsuribayashi, the only story recommended to be read is Miotsukushi PS2. You could in theory read Miotsukushi Omote after this as well, because a lot of the changes concern the main cast rather than the advanced story cast. You won't be able to have context for all of Omote's changes though, so it's not advised. Also, do not read Miotsukushi Omote before Miotsukushi Ura, as it spoils Ura's final outcome. Only read Omote after PS2 if you are fully sure you don't want to read the advanced story. If you do want to read the advanced story though, you must read all of the advanced story before Miotsukushi Ura. Miotsukushi Omote is then meant to be read after Ura, and this can be done in two ways. You could read Omote directly after Ura, but the only thing is, this gives a worse experience. Miotsukushi PS2 is a way better story than Omote, so reading Miotsukushi PS2, the better quality story, in full, and then reading what you missed out on, i.e. the changed content only, in Miotsukushi Omote, means you not only get to experience all of the content, but you also get to experience it in the most fun way. You could read Miotsukushi PS2 after Miotsukushi Ura, but it isn't a requirement. You could actually read it before the advanced story. So if you wanted to, you could do Miotsukushi PS2, the advanced story, Miotsukushi Ura, and then Miotsukushi Omote's changed content. I also need to show you how to only read the changed content in Miotsukushi Omote. After having read Miotsukushi PS2, allow the skip mode to stop at unread lines. Then just skip through the chapter, read the unread content, and you should be good to go. For some people though, this may not work, so I've provided an image in the description showing the key events that have been changed. You can skip to these events via the character jump. In summary, here is a resource showing all the possible ways to read the Miotsukushi chapters in. After having read all of the Miotsukushi chapters, there is a nice little Miotsukushi Afterparty that you can read. Do be aware that this Afterparty requires every single console arc to be read. If you want to play the Switch version, you also need to have read all of Hor Plus as well. I would also like to talk about the console arc, Kotohogushi. This arc focuses on a tale of a legend in Onigafuchi, hundreds of years before June 1983. It can be read any time after Matsuri Bayashi, but I'd recommend reading it after either Miotsukushi PS2 or Omote. This is because Kotohogushi expands on a flashback introduced in those two stories. Once having read every single console arc, there's a little epilogue you can read. There's not really much to this epilogue, just a few short tips. I want to lastly talk about Higurashi Mei. Similar to Hor Plus, this is some extra content without relevance to anything else in the story. Originally, Mei is a Japanese gacha game that can be downloaded from the Japanese App Store. If you're interested in playing it, I've provided a guide in the description. As well as the gameplay, it has quite a bit of story to it. This story features crossovers with other visual novels, but it's mainly crossed over with Umineko. Mei spoils a lot of stuff in Umineko, and some characters only found in answer arcs are featured, so make sure to fully read Umineko and Higurashi before looking into this arc. The story of Higurashi Mei, without any of the normal gameplay, can be found in English on Lambda Delto's channel. A link to a partly finished fan-made translation can also be found in the description. There we are guys, that is everything you need to know about the reading order of Higurashi's content. I really hope you guys found this video helpful. If you did, make sure to like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Happy reading and goodbye.